Éirevision, Ireland's #1 Eurovision podcast.
Hello everyone, DUs August Fulta Arat to the Éirevision podcast. We're very happy to have you here with us. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello, we're back in our lovely new studio setup. And if you're one of our regular listeners on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., welcome back. It's been a little while since we've had an episode like this. Connor, I trust we're very excited to get stuck into this one.
We are. I think this has been like a staple of the Éirevision podcast since we started. We've been kind of first known for our like Kealy interviews as people come
Louise,
up and say
Connor and Kealy, huh?
Yeah. What a shit trio.
I beg to differ.
Oh God. Yeah, so like these are one of like the staple in the season for Éirevision, but we didn't have one this year, of course, because we had Michael Kealy actually at our live show back in November, and you could hear some of it in, I think it was our wrapped episode of 2024. So if you want to hear a bit of that, go back and listen to that. But of course, we have him for a very in-depth chat. Jesus Christ, it was a very long chat, Lee, wasn't it?
Listen, that man can talk for Ireland, and I love it. Like, we have so many questions. I think we could have kept him for another little while, but he gave up enough of his Friday evening for us very, very kindly. So always very appreciative to Michael for being so giving with his time and very open with his thoughts. You know, like, I think it's important to recognise really as Irish Eurovision fans that we are fortunate to have a head of delegation so willing to communicate as much as possible what's going on within the broadcaster and the delegation for Eurovision. You know, not every fan across Europe is privy to that information in their own country, you know. Like, you literally have Eurovision countries who just drop the song like the day of the week of the delegation meeting and head off.
We see you, Georgia.
You know. Armenia can be very quiet, you know. So in Ireland, we are lucky to kind of have such time with our delegation, as we say. And yeah, very honoured to have these chats here on the podcast. It's really cool. And yeah, I really enjoyed that chat. Before we get stuck into it though, Connor, we're chasing our tails a little bit in that we are almost finished talking about the Eurovision 2025 countries. I know we've had people saying, where's Germany and where's this country? We promise it's coming. We're catching up. We've been busy.
I actually lost track of where we are even at. How
we
many
have
we've
10 left or 11 left, something like. I know we're dying to chat Germany, Denmark.
You are.
The others. Yeah, as always.
What was the comment? Someone was like, I can't wait to hear Lou's famous Germany rant. So this is like a teaser.
Cannot confirm nor deny.
Is it going to be positive or is she going to be actually negative again this year? We'll have to wait and see.
It'll be German and efficient anyway. That's as much as I'll say. I won't give anything else away.
I
want to keep them waiting. Of course, as well, on top of, you know, just covering the countries in general, lots of our regular listeners will know that we have the quickfire episodes coming up very, very soon. That's always a staple for us in the month of April. So looking forward to getting started on those. Obviously, guys, if you want to take part in the quickfire episodes, actually, just to explain to any hopefully new listeners we may have, hello to you guys. The quickfire episodes are a series that we do every Eurovision season where in the month before the contest, we pop up question boxes on our Instagram and invite the viewers to give a score out of 10 and a brief one-line comment for each Eurovision entry of the year. And then it's what it says on the tin. We do a quickfire episode where myself and Connor and or Alex, depending on who's available that day to record, do a very quick, sometimes Micheál.
And who cares about the song too?
True. We do a very quick episode to kind of recap our thoughts, give our scores.
Sorry, the way you hit the card was like, it's like kind of wobbled, like Mr. Blobby. Sorry.
Is Mr. Blobby in the room with us?
Oh my God, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, the listeners are probably like, what was that?
Sound, oh
That's me with my Éirevision card bopping it around. Yes, so we do a quick recap basically of the songs, give them a score, and then we do an average score, and Matt's Hall is always very helpful with that. So yeah, that's always like a big highlight to get like a good feel for what the Éirevision team and the Éirevision listeners rate songs. I mean, Eurovision fans just love that. Like, you know, I'm not a super mathsy person, but I am when it comes to a Eurovision rating. I love that stuff.
That was like peak lockdown, ranking everything.
It was actually, wasn't it?
We literally ranked the likes. they're the lights of one year. It's crazy. But
Do you remember we ranked like crisp brands one day for the cracks? We were bored in a group chat. That was funny. But anyway, yes, guys, if you want to get involved in the quick fires, and we know that you do, we know that you love hearing your comments and your ratings, get over and follow our Instagram, Éirevision podcast. Where else can people follow us, Connor?
they can follow us on TikTok, Éirevision Podcast, X, Twitter, whatever you're calling it, Éirevision Pod. You can email us at airvisionpodcast@gmail.com as well. We love an email. We're literally on everything, lads. So literally just look up Éirevision and you'll probably find us. You know what our logo looks like. It's above you right now. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it's what's in front of you right now. So literally just go and check us out there and get in contact, because the more opinions that we hear, the better the episodes are. And like we say all the time, we love hearing what you guys have got to say about Eurovision 2025.
It's a podcast for Irish voices. We don't want to be the only ones all the time.
Exactly.
Also, actually, for people who maybe aren't on Instagram, do feel free to email us your quick fires. So, you could list out, you don't have to do all of them, but you could do a couple of them. Give us your score out of 10 and a brief comment, and we will definitely try and find a way to include your thoughts in the quick fire episodes, because we don't want to alienate people who are not on the L Insta. Understandably, not everybody is. Also, if we could just plug our Buy Me a Coffee, that would be fantastic, because our Buy Me a Coffee really enables us to continue doing what we do over here at the Éirevision podcast. We use a lot of equipment. We have a lot of subscriptions and such, traveling, etc., merchandise. So every little helps. If you like what we do, we'd really appreciate, in this Eurovision season of giving and serving cant, etc., please support us on our Buy Me a Coffee. You can give us a coffee, you can give us 5, whatever you like. buymeacoffee.com/Éirevision, or you can find the link in our linked tree in all of our bios. Yes, of course, I found a way to insert serving cant into that. And let me tell you guys, that is not the last time that will be uttered on today's episode.
No, and it wasn't me who gave the episode an E finally, which is brilliant.
It was the head of delegation.
It was the head of delegation. And he just didn't say the F word. He said other words.
Teaser. I'm very excited for the listeners to hear this.
Me
Connor.
too.
Yeah.
I always love chatting to Michael Kealy, and you guys obviously love listening to it as well, because you always let us know. So look, everything on the table from Eurosong 2024 to Eurosong 2025.
Samantha Mumba,
panels, head of delegation meetings, everything like that. And should we get into it?
let's get stuck in.
Here it is. Welcome back to the Éirevision podcast, everyone, and we have a very special guest, a reoccurring guest at this stage. We first met him on Zoom way back in October 2022. Then we met him in person, and then we shoved him in front of a live audience back in November, and we decided to go easy on him now because we are back online with him. It is the one and only Mr. Michael Kealy. Welcome back to the podcast, Michael.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Connor. I'm actually in my kitchen this time, so thank you very much for inviting me back on the show.
The comfort of your own home.
From my own home, I have a cat who's making sounds like they want to get in, but I'm going to leave them out there for the moment.
The podcast cat. Michael, thanks for joining us, as Connor mentioned. And Connor mentioned as well, October 2022, the first time we spoke to you on the Éirevision podcast, one of our very first episodes as well. And it's mad for us when we cast our minds back to that time at the end of 2022. We had Turin hosting Eurovision, and Brooke didn't qualify, and a lot of the fans really loved Brooke. And I think at the time, we had a really long streak of non-qualifications, and we were in a very different place. We were all feeling a little bit down about it, probably yourself included. And then cut to May 2024, you have Ireland getting 6th place, thanks to Bambi Tug and all of the team, a top 10 result. Do you think we've had a change in momentum due to any particular factors, or do you think a result like that is pot luck? Because a lot did change in less than 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that, and I know I've said this before, that it just depends on what we get on any given year, and we can be very lucky and get an artist like Bambi that just catapults us back into the top 10 where we should be, obviously. But I also think that in order that we have been kind of working our way around to attracting artists like Bambi. Do you know what I mean? And, I know people might not see that over a number of years, but I certainly know that there's been a deliberate attempt to try and get artists of a certain caliber that then in turn make it all right for other artists to have a go at it, And I know you hated him, but John Lydon played his part in that. And, despite the fact that we all know the song didn't qualify and probably wouldn't have done very well in the Eurovision context, but from our Eurosong point of view, it definitely, I think, was a bit of a game changer in terms of people like Bambi then looking at it and going, well, maybe this is an okay place to an okay outlet for my art.
Interesting. And obviously looking back to 2022 as well, how would you compare, in your own view, Eurosong 22 to Eurosong 25? Chalk and cheese, a lot of people would say.
Yeah, and again, like we have been, like, it's not like we stand still every year and just do the same old thing, although I know that was one of the big complaints for many years. But, a couple of things happened, obviously, in 23 now? It probably is 20. Is it 23 or 24? I can't remember now. No, it must be 23. When Ryan Tubridy decided to leave the Late Late Show, that allowed a rethink of the studio and the set and all that kind of stuff. And the direction they went in terms of the set for the new look Late Late Show wasn't suitable at all for a Eurosong. So that allowed us then to say, well, let's just start again from a black box. And what would we do if, we just have a black box to work with? And also I'd been working on New Year's Eve as well, and we'd done different things with New Year's Eve, and we'd managed to kind of make the studio look a bit different, bring in an orchestra, all that kind of stuff. So I think that kind of helped as well. And that also helped the perception of it, that we were trying something different. We were trying to make it a special show. We were trying to involve a lot of the fans as well. I know, and rather than just have 200 people sitting in a bleacher looking at a corner of the studio, where they all have to look right to see the act that's appearing there. We made the act front and center. We gave them a bigger stage. We spend a bit more money bringing in screens, all of that kind of stuff. So I think there's definitely a change in perception, I think, in RT as well, of the competition. I think people are more aware of the potential it has. They're more aware of the audience it brings. They're more aware of, the fact that this is a live music event that is growing, as opposed to a lot of live events are going the opposite direction, but this one is growing. So I think there is definitely a recognition of all of that, and a recognition now that we should be doing more to capitalize on that aspect of it. But as always I say to you, this thing is always competing for resources with everything else that goes on in RTE. And, it can be tricky, because to get more money for your project, you have to kill somebody else's. And so that's not easy. Do you know what I mean? So, we're to work in progress. Yeah. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
you see what's been done, and you see the slow evolution. I'll grant it is a slow evolution. It's not a massive revolution, but I think we're heading towards something. And maybe by the time, I have to retire, there'll be some other show there that will be a much bigger, much, grander extravaganza than there currently is, but we'll have to wait and see.
I'd love to ask you as well, within reason, as much as you can tell us, like you've alluded to, that you don't, you're not opposed to a selection moving off the Late Late and making it bigger or better. How close did we come to that this year? Obviously, it wasn't possible with the constraints we had, but was there any mention of it? Or
I think it was considered, but then it was discounted just because of the costs involved in a one-off show. And also like at the time of year that we do Eurosong, we're in the middle of like Dancing with the Stars, which is a huge independent production. You've seen it. You were out in Fonthill. You know the scale of that thing. You know, so to do another one-off show. I mean, the great thing about Dancing with the Stars is that it goes on over 12 weeks. So, but if you were trying to just do Dancing with the Stars for 1 week, it would cost you a fortune. But at least if you're doing it for 12 weeks, you can spread the cost. So there's a couple of things. One is that the expense of it. Two is that, you know, do we have a slot in the schedule for it? Do we have a suitable venue that we can get for 12 weeks? All of those kind of things. And they're not things that you can just stand up at the drop of a hat. You know, I mean, they're things that take a lot of careful planning and a lot of consideration and a lot of financial planning as much as anything else, you know. But so it was considered, but it wasn't. I don't think it was ever going to be that close, to be perfectly honest, you know. I mean, I think next year, I mean, and I don't want to preempt anything, but I think next year we have a better chance of maybe getting it out of the studio, out of Studio 4. Like it could be still a late Eurosong special, but it could be somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? So that I think would be. See, I never thought the problem was with the Late Show branding necessarily around it. I think it's just with the space that we have when you compare it to a lot of other competitions around Europe. You know, it just doesn't really measure up, you know, in terms of our facilities. So I think if we were to move it on a bit further next year, I would like to see it still under the Late Show Eurosong brand, but maybe out in a bigger place.
And I think this is something that you've told us in the past, you know, that Late Show slot on a Friday night, it is only a slot at a time, you know, whether you put Eurosong in it or a traditional Late Show on a Friday night. So I think a lot of people will be very happy to hear that there is a chance of it moving outside of the studio, but still within the Late Show.
And Patrick's a great host.
And
as
Patrick's
well.
brilliant. Yeah. He's brought a fresh air to it.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick actually genuinely loves the Eurovision, so he's a fan. And actually, after EMMY won, the following Monday or Tuesday, whatever, he came up to me in the office and said that his kids have been insisting he plays it non-stop in the car, you know? So so that's, you know, that just shows if he's a fan, whether he likes it or not. His kids make him a fan now. That's the, you know, but I think he genuinely has an interest in it, and he likes the you know, he likes the spectacle of it, I suppose.
And speaking there, you mentioned about next year potentially seeing Eurosong move out of the studio, but still within the Late Show. And obviously in the media, with everything that's been going on in RT the last few years, there has been reports about, you know, the Late Show being shipped out to a different studio, similar to Fair City, you know, moving set. Would that be something that, you know, would be aligning with that vision from RT now, that you're kind of nearly forced to move?
I don't think that would necessarily be tied to that, to be honest. I think the Late Show moving out of Studio 4 is probably a slightly longer term project, because you need a venue for 35 weeks of the year for that, you know. So that's a slightly different project. So I wouldn't link the two of them necessarily.
And when it comes to like Eurosong and your preparations, which we know is a big task with lots of small tasks within it, one of the important tasks is obviously collecting the song submissions. And last year we had, you know, a slightly shorter submission window. Do you think that affected the amount of songs that we got, or do you because obviously in 2023 you had a longer period after we were in Liverpool. Do you think that makes a difference, that submission window, or will you get much of the same?
Not hugely, to be honest. I mean, I think when you open it earlier, you get the people that send in their entries on day one when you open the window are not, generally speaking, serious entries, because they're people who are just randomly throwing songs around that they have already written, that they haven't really, you know, thought about them necessarily for Eurosong. So I honestly don't think, I mean, I think you need a decent window of 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever. But I think the people who know, like all the songwriters in this country, like all the record companies, anybody who's interested in Eurovision as an outlet for their music and their art, know that every year the window tends to be around September, and occasionally I would get people who would email me and say, listen, I only, found out about it last week. Is there any chance I could, submit my song next Monday if the closing date is Friday? And I'm always like open to, like, I'm not, a Nazi about the closing window. I think we're like the object of the exercise is not to be good at rules. The object is to get the right song for Eurosong, or the right number of songs for Eurosong, and the right song for Eurovision. So I don't think the window necessarily makes a huge difference, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I know like other countries who have more people involved, like Norway or whatever, start songwriting camps around June or whatever, like, and Stig or whatever, or Mads, now the new head of delegation, will be doing the tour of those different songwriting camps. And but like we just, so far anyway, we just didn't have the resources or the personnel necessarily to do all that, properly, and to give enough time for that kind of thing. But I think that's another thing that might change this year. I mean, we did have a good discussion today about songwriting camps, and because we were talking about EMMY's song came from a songwriting camp called The Woods, which is run in Norway, and they also run other camps around Europe, in the Netherlands and Denmark, maybe in two other places. And I'd been talking to the guy from the Woods songwriting camp, and he was asking about the possibility of running one here. So I was saying, yeah, look, I'd be more than happy to help out if I could. Anybody wanting to start a songwriting camp here. And I think that might be, a way of just pushing things on a little bit further as well,
We were talking about submissions there, Michael. Did you have much time to approach people in advance of this year, or did many people approach you?
I had, I mean, like, we had a few people approach us, and I approached a couple of people, and, and I think it's been well documented that we had a kind of a mutual contact with Samantha Mumba, and we kind of sounded each other out sort of from a bit of a distance, if you will. So yeah, I mean, I did approach people, and some people thought about it and decided they wouldn't do it, and that's fair enough. And I think, I think Samantha was brilliant for actually taking the time, and putting her head above the parapet and having a go at Eurosong, and and despite all the controversy afterwards about the aubergines, whatnot, I thought like she was really nice about it all, to be honest. And she, I think she deserves a lot of credit for coming over for taking part, because it's I don't think it's done her any harm, to be honest. I mean, I think it's certainly put her back in, her name back into a lot of people's minds again, and I'm sure that's not a bad thing when she's looking at booking shows in the summer or whatever. She, I hope she will look back on it as generally speaking, as a kind of a positive experience, even though she didn't win, and that, I mean, it's anybody can speculate on the reasons why she didn't make it in the end. I mean, she was neck and neck with EMMY after the two juries. It was all down to the public vote. So it was entirely up to the public. So they chose who they chose, so there you go. I don't know what more you can say about that, but I hope it hasn't put other well-known people off maybe taking part, that they just think that this, you can't win it or whatever. I think maybe Samantha, if she had a slightly different song, I think might have, maybe when she looks back at it with a bit of distance, she might think maybe the song wasn't entirely the right type of song for the competition that we had. I mean, I know she was very, very invested in the song, and she wrote it obviously herself, and it came from a place of, a very personal place for her and all that. And but I just wonder, in the Eurovision context, would the song have been right? I think the performance she did on the night was actually great, and I'm sure we've talked about it before, but I thought she made really good use of the stage. I thought her experience really showed, when it came to staging something on the small stage that we had, and it wasn't a particularly expensive or elaborate production. I mean, it was just a couple of trestle tables with a lot of food on them and a few chairs, and she had five very good dancers as well. So look, I think if there was anything that she could look back and take away from it, I think it might be maybe the song was probably just not the right thing at the right time for the public.
Careful now, she might be Instagramming about you.
Listen, I have nothing but good to say about Samantha Mumba. Samantha Mumba was prepared to come over from LA and take a chance in our Eurosong. So I would never ever say anything against her for doing that. I thought she was brilliant, and I will be forever grateful for her for doing that.
It was interesting, actually, for us as fans of the whole thing, because obviously the nation were talking. Like, I had people in work asking me about it, family members, people who aren't normally interested in the bubble. So there was a good reach to it. But a lot of people were asking me, and why is there a panel? And I was saying, well, there's actually been one there for years. Like, it's not a new thing. What did you think of all the kind of national discussion around there being a panel on Eurosong? I was intrigued that people were so interested by it, because it's always been there, and we asked you about it like years ago.
I mean, the panel serves a very practical purpose other than commenting on the songs. It allows the staging people to change over the stage for the next act, so like somebody has to get on stage and remove the tables and the chairs, take down the curtains that Adji had or whatever it was, and set it up for the next person. So that takes time, so you can't just cut to Paddy sitting there on his own, because, or, chatting to somebody, because you do need something different. You do need another element that allows you to do that. Like in Eurovision land, they have 40, you've both been to the competition, there's like a swarm of people come on stage to take everything off and to set the stage for the next one. You also have a postcard, a 40-second postcard. You have, but they have the whole thing down to a T, so they have rehearsed it over weeks. So we don't get that. We get like the Thursday to rehearse, and then Friday we're on the air. That's it. So we only get very limited amount of studio time to do it. So you do need you do need something else to go to, another element. And that element has traditionally been a panel of people who have commented on the songs. And in the past, what they used to do was used to get a panel of people, and they were kind of afraid to say what they really thought about the songs, because they felt at the time, well, maybe will influence the audience or whatever, or, blah, blah, blah. And then people complained about that because they said it's very boring, because all the panels say is that every song is brilliant. So a couple of years ago, we decided to change that, and we put it into our Eurosong contract as well. Said, look, the panel are there to comment on the songs and to give their true opinion on it, and that they may say stuff that is complimentary, or they may say stuff that is critical, but that is part of the deal. You know what I mean? So when you come to Eurosong, that is going to be the part of the deal that people might say mean, or they mightn't. I don't think the panel were mean, to be honest. I think they, and I don't think they were overly harshly critical, or whatever. I mean, I thought they gave their opinion, and that's really what they're there for. And the thing about music is that my opinion is as valid as your opinion. You may love Taylor Swift, I may hate her, but we're both right. You know what I mean? Or we're both wrong. I don't know, but it's one or the other.
I think we personally love that the panel are honest.
Yeah.
It's more important. Even if I love a song and they don't like it, I would prefer as a viewer that they're genuine with it.
Yeah.
And I think that change in the panel has been really good for the show.
Yeah, it certainly makes it more watchable as a show. It makes it more enjoyable, because you want to hear what they have to say after each song, because you see the song and then you want to hear, you don't, if all they're going to say is it's brilliant, then you might as well go and make a cup of tea. But if you want to hear their actual, their actual view on it. So Arthur, Donal, Bambi, and Laura. Sorry. Sorry, Laura. I was about to say Louise because we had Louise last year, so it's Laura. I thought they did a good job, and so I know some people in the show didn't think so, but I thought they did what we'd asked them to do.
And it was in the contract, as you said.
Exactly.
I suppose.
They knew what they were getting themselves into.
Well, I mean, but like, the music business is not for the faint-hearted anyway. You know what I mean? So like, music is a competition. The music business is a competition. People will say all sorts of mean things about you online anyway. You know what I mean? So like, if you people's opinions are people's opinions. So you either have the courage of the conviction of your art, or you're so insecure about it that somebody saying you're rubbish is enough to push you over the edge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, like when you listen back to the panel and you listen to what the Eurovision fans were saying in the community, like it was very similar. Like I think we said something very similar to what Arthur had said about, Samantha's Song of the Night. So, they did echo the fan, voice that was out there. So
yeah, and I mean, I thought I thought Samantha was like brilliant performer. She's obviously been one of the highest profile acts we've had in the last few years. She's somebody who's had an amazing music career, stretching over decades, and she is she's a national treasure, I would say, and so I thought the performance, I thought, her taking part was absolutely amazing. I think if the one thing she reflects on with a bit of distance might be was that the right song at the right time in the right place? That's all I'd say. And I think that's what the panel said, basically, and I'm, but but that can be hard to hear, I suppose, when you put so much time and work and effort in, and traveling such a long distance to come and do it with, let's face it, not a huge amount of support from, financial support or whatever from RTE, because we just can't do that. So I do understand why people, do take it personally and stuff like that. And, because a lot of time and emotional energy is put into each performance, And let's not forget, I mean, there was also Aji, who came along a second time and didn't win again, I'm afraid.
No, totally. Just speaking of results and everything like that, the juries were another kind of debate amongst the fans this year. We saw with the result itself that kind of a very polarizing result from the televote to the two juries, and both juries of course consist of 4 people, so 8 across the two juries. What are your thoughts on the juries this year? Do you think there is room for maybe expansion or development? Because we've seen it last year as well. The 2 results very different from the Irish public overall.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we definitely could expand the juries, but it's down to time. Like, I have to go through all my contacts, contact people, wait for them to get back to me to say, are they free? Then, write up all the rules, email them. Then some of them come back and say, oh, sorry, is it on Thursday? I thought it was the following Thursday. I can't do it anymore. Then I have to go and find someone else. So it does take a lot of time and effort to try and even find 4 people around, and not 4 people that, I could get the same 4 people every year. You know what I mean? And say, listen, sign them up. And, but to try and get new people every year, and also to try and get a good mix of people. I want to get the right 4 people as well, because you want to reflect. You don't want to get 4 heavy metal fans. You know what I mean? I don't want to get 4 heavy metal fans or 4 fans of whatever. I need to get a kind of a variety of interests and all that kind of stuff. So that does take time. It takes enough time to do 4, let alone to try and get 8 of them. Like the Swedish Melody Festival jury, they have people working on that all the time. You know what I mean? So there's people just working on juries. That's it. You know what I mean? So and they work on them. was on that, and Louise was on that as well this year. And it like they contacted me before Christmas. Do you know what I mean? So that's when they were working on that. So it does take time, you know. So so more people on the team would help definitely, and then also then, you know, collating all those results takes time and all that kind of stuff, you know. So but yeah, I do think 8 people on one side versus the Irish public on the other side, it seems a little imbalanced. Maybe we should have more people on the jury side.
And speaking of the need for a team, Michael, can we ask you about last year? We saw kind of a press release of sorts that Claire Hughes was hopefully going to be joining you for the Eurovision journey. Is there any update on that this year?
Yeah, no, Claire is definitely joining us for Basel, and she has been working with me at the moment, organising a lot of EMMY's pre-party arrangements, because that's a huge amount of work. You know what I mean? Like, even just like, it's unbelievable. I won't go through the details with you, but it's, you know, EMMY is busy nearly every week. In fact, she is busy every week between now and May, right? We've got 1 week that we just have to clear at the end of April for rehearsal, because she needs to rehearse, obviously, with the dancers we're going to send to Basel. But we had to struggle to clear that week because there is a lot of other demands. Like, you know, we want her to be back on the Late Late Show as well, before she appears in the semi-final. We need to, you know, she's doing all of these pre-parties. She's doing Norway this weekend. She did Sweden last weekend. She's doing Amsterdam and London. Then we want to bring her back to Ireland because we're going to need to, obviously, to sort out just final costumes and all that kind of stuff. We'll probably have to send one of our costume wardrobe people over to Norway to fit the dancers when we finally settle on who they are. So there's a lot going on, and Claire has been brilliant helping to organise just the logistics around all of those pre-parties, you know. And then, so that's allowed me then, so I've then been dealing with like the other boring stuff, like like trying to get people paid through RTE, trying to, you know, railroad stuff through the organisation that is quite rigid in terms of setting people up on our financial system and trying to pay people, you know. So so I've been doing all that, contracts, hotels, flights, which I'll be working on, you know, when we settle on who our final travelling party is. Dealing with Marvin, obviously, you know, and organising and doing the negotiations with him, and Black Skull is his team as well. Obviously getting all of the materials together that we need that I needed for the heads delegation meeting, which is an enormous amount. I mean, I'll show you someday the amount of stuff you need that they ask. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's getting worse. Like, there's about 40 different forms that you have to fill out, 40 different things. It's just growing exponentially every year. And so I'm delighted Claire has been on board to help me out with that. But at the same time, Claire has another, like, you know, the way I have a day, like I have other stuff I have to do, like the St. Patrick's Day parade or whatever. But, like, Claire's got a day job too, you know what I mean? So she's got something else she's working on as well. So it's not as if she's just free to work on this, you know. She's obviously up to her eyes with another project, you know.
Sounds like Tetris. You're just trying to fit in where you can.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look with envy at my colleagues in the BBC and all that kind of stuff. So, like, when I was at the heads of delegation meeting, like, you know, the Icelandics had 2 people there, 3 people there. The Norwegians had, you know what I mean? Like, the UK had a couple of people there. Finns had 3 people there, you know. So, like, here I am, there, Billy No Mates, sitting at the meeting, as the lone person from Ireland.
On St. Patrick's Day.
On St. Patrick's Day. Could you believe it? Yeah. Outrageous.
Oh, we have to insert the small violins.
Yeah. Michael, you mentioned there about the team, of course, and, you know, the rigid organisation that is RTE. we mentioned this to you before. We asked you about this before about kind of the organization's view to Eurovision. Has, in your own opinion, has that improved over the years? They've obviously given you Claire this time around. Do you think they're slowly opening up and realizing the
Yeah,
beast that is Eurovision?
I mean, I definitely do, but I mean, and like I know like Kevin Backhurst, for instance, our director general, is a fan of the Eurovision because he's told me, and so there is a lot of recognition that this thing is a big event and that we should we should probably be doing more. But as I said to you, like it's just one thing in an organization that does a million different things, and it competes for resources with everything else. And, in fairness to Kevin is looking at the bigger picture of RT and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't get involved in the nitty gritty of whether we spend X amount of money on that as opposed to that. You know what I mean? There is a director of vision now, Steve Carson, who's come on board. Again, he's rejoined the organization. He used to be an employee back about 10 years ago, and he's rejoined us recently. So Kevin, who is our director general, and Steve, who is our head of vision, and Alan, who is the group head of entertainment, I think are all, they're smart individuals. They know the value of this thing. They can see the numbers. They can see, the potential in it. But it's just a matter of just trying to get ring fence enough money to make this thing, as big as we would want it,
And when it comes to the other delegations, like obviously you're in the game now over a decade. You've met so many delegations from various broadcasters and countries. This is kind of a fun question. I want you to imagine that you could wave a magic wand and you could steal an element. And I know like budget's probably like the number one thing, right? Because we know we have constraints with that. But like, if you could steal any element of another delegation, whether it's like the way they run their selection, the amount of time they have, or creative directors, you could wave a magic wand and have anything you wanted for Ireland. What would you poach?
I mean, I think the gold standard is Melody Festival, right? There's no question about it. Like as a selection show, just as a pure machine for winning the Eurovision, they have been the most successful country in the last 10 years or more, probably 20 years at this stage, because they have this huge machine behind selecting their act, and the whole country is behind it. And, they don't have any problem with former winners coming back and putting themselves through that process again, because the thing is seen as being a prestigious event in its own right. So this year we had Mons, Selmaro, coming second or whatever. We've had Loreen coming back again, but they don't see an issue with coming back and putting themselves through the process again. I think that the way it stands at the moment in RT, even if somebody was to go and do well or even win it for Ireland, they would never come back and put themselves through a Eurosong again, in an attempt to win it the second time. They would just want to be, but they would want to be appointed as our representative. But just to rewind it, that was the way that it used to be in the 1980s. Johnny Logan went through the National Song Contest twice, or if not more. He did it first in 1980 with What's Another Year, and then he came back and put himself through that competition again in 1987 with What's Another Year. So, so we had a kind of a version of Melody Festival, and that was a standalone show that the whole country watched, that all of the songwriters had a lot of respect for. A lot of very credible singers took part in it every year. And somewhere along the line, whether it was through Eurosong, the TV show that we did, Eurostar, or something else, but we changed the perception of the competition from being one that was kind of a credible one where professionals entered it, and there was no shame in not winning it, and you could come back, or you could win the Eurovision and come back and put yourself through that process again, because that was the right thing to do and the biggest forum to do it in. I think when we started telling, amateurs and people who had no experience in performing that this competition is for you, then that kind of irrevocably changed it. Well, and let's hope it's not irrevocable, but it certainly changed it, the perception of it, for a long, long time. And then, when they expanded the competition and then suddenly we weren't winning, a lot of people thought, well, it's our right, it's our birthright as Irish people to win this, every second year. So why aren't we doing it? And then I think people got frustrated, not just the public. I think people in RT got frustrated and decided, because we had some pretty poor results. And then we decided, well, do you know what? If we can't win it, we're just going to treat it with the contempt that, we feel it now deserves. And I'm going to mention Dustin here because he slags me all the time every time he's on radio. So
didn't he say you were dead last year or something?
I was dead. Yeah, he said I was dead. And then he said, I heard him recently say that he was on with Ray Darcy, and he said basically that I had approached EMMY in the airport and asked her to take part in the Eurosong because I overheard her whistling a tune or something like that. So.
And have you heard what EMMY thinks of Dustin?
No,
because we introduced her to Dustin the other night, and she's a huge fan.
Was she familiar with them?
No, she said, "Is that a turkey?
Is that the turkey everyone's talking about?"
Yeah.
Oh my god!
That was a good synopsis, I suppose.
Yeah. Is that the turkey everyone's talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so Dustin and me have a long relationship going back many years. So if he slags me on the radio, I can slag him on your podcast. That's all right.
Fair. Level playing field. We're gonna move on a bit and kind of jump back to the present day. Of course, EMMY won Eurosong on the night. She came, top of the public vote and top of the Irish jury, and also second with the national or the international jury. We kind of want to know a bit, kind of the handover, really, from moving from 24 to 25. How quick of a handover is it to kind of introduce EMMY to, being the representative for Ireland? Does it happen straight after the win, or is it kind of a let her sit with that for a few days?
No, let's straight after. I mean, we trying to think back now because it all feels very long ago now, but I know it was only February. But so she won on the Friday, and so pretty much like we met her on she was going to go home on the Sunday because she didn't think she was going to win. So she had her flight booked for or maybe even the Saturday. I think she had a flight booked for the Saturday.
Queen.
Yeah, but she just didn't think she was going to win. So we kept her on till Monday, and we had like a long chat with her on Monday about all the different things that we needed to go through, and with her management as well, because she's got 2 Norwegian managers. So so it's been nonstop since then, because there's been an avalanche of emails and stuff that we have to do, and all the forms that I mentioned earlier we have to fill out and all that kind of stuff. So it's been nonstop since she won, and I think in fairness, like it's not like it's not like the Rose of Tralee, where somebody's like the Rose of Tralee for the year, and then they turn up in Tralee and hand over the sash or whatever it is, the crown, to the next Rose of Tralee. It is like, once Eurovision is over, it's pretty much, we're pretty much done with you. And I know that sounds bad, but I'm saying we're pretty much done with you. I mean, our your obligations to RTE are over. You know what I mean? So it's up to you then to capitalise and do whatever you want after that, which Bambi did, obviously. I mean, they went on a huge European tour. They went off to the States. They're, and they're doing their own thing. And it was great to get them back on for the Eurosong final. And it was great to get Bambi's endorsement of EMMY. I mean, that was the one that Bambi said was their favourite as well. So it is pretty much, so once you win, it's pretty much non-stop between the moment you win Eurosong and the 18th or the 17th of May, when we walk out of the arena after the grand final, whatever happens, if we were lucky enough to win it, obviously all sorts of craziness will be unleashed on us in RTE, but if we don't win it and we get to the final, I mean, we hope we do well, and then obviously we'll be forever grateful to EMMY, and EMMY will always have a place in the Irish Eurovision fans' hearts forever. Well, regardless of how she does in May, I think she's always going to have a place in Irish Eurovision fans' hearts. But say if we were to win it, then all manner of, say, hell will be unleashed.
Bring it on.
I'd love to see it.
We were talking about earlier about, chatting to you back in October 2022, and it was a very different mood amongst the fans. But we've definitely seen over the last few years a huge shift with people coming forward in a way of, being Eurovision fans. Of course, OJ Ireland's a big platform for, people to go to events, and not to plug ourselves, but even our podcast, we see so many people say, it's great to have a place for Irish fans. Do you see it yourself that, things are looking very, very good, and there is a bit of momentum behind this small little nation now?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I do think fans are fickle, and they love it when we're doing well, and when we're, like football, they love it when you're winning, but when you're not, nobody loves you. So that unfortunately was the story for a long time. We weren't doing very well, and not because, not because I don't think we were sending acts. There's like a kind of there's a sort of a chemistry of different elements that need to come together to make a really good Eurosong and to get us through from a semi-final into the final. And that is a really good singer, a really good song, and a really good staging. And I think we've had various elements of that in the past, but it's very hard to get all of those three things together. And then when you're not doing well, then, you don't get the caliber of artists to then applying, necessarily that you want. And that's just the way it is with, I suppose, with everything. I mean, if you're a football team not doing well, you don't get the big players to come in and play for you, or whatever. But I mean, funny enough, I heard, or maybe it came on my Spotify playlist, but like I heard Wild Youth's song "We Are One" on my Spotify playlist, and I actually listened to it the whole way through, and I thought that's actually not a bad song. And I don't know why it didn't qualify for the final in Eurovision, but there you go.
No comment. No, I think like what you say there about it being a combination of things. Like sometimes I felt, my personal opinion, that we've had the right song, but the staging hasn't been right, or the song wasn't great, but the staging was really cool. It is hard to get the potion really of a solid Eurovision entry.
Yeah, it is, and also, people being obviously, if you don't get experienced performers, and this is why it was such a mistake sending amateurs to the event. Like, it's such an intimidating arena, that if you're sending someone out into the middle of an arena, like no matter how, much they've sort of thought about it, and with the hairbrush in front of the mirror, it's not the same as standing on that stage facing, 200 million people or whatever, and being told you've got to sing in tune and you've got to belt it out and you've got to sound like, better, you got to be better than everybody else in this arena in terms of your vocal performance. So that is very, very hard to get somebody who will not be intimidated by that and will be able to perform at that level. And I think, I think last year Bambi certainly had it. There's no question about it. Once they stood on stage, they just went into performance mode and just did it, and I think they even said themselves, it's like they were just had a kind of an outer body experience. They just got rid of, there was no nerves. They just got rid of any sense of intimidation or whatever, and just performed, and it really showed. I think if you ask, I just mentioned Wild Youth, if you were to ask Conor, I think he'll say he probably underestimated even though he was a very, very experienced performer, around Ireland in festivals and facing big crowds and all the rest of it, get into the Eurovision arena, stand on that stage, and you'll feel pressure like you've never felt before. Nicky Byrne said it, and look at him, he's one of the most experienced people we've ever sent to Eurovision. He even felt that pressure. He said like nothing else. So it is a matter of getting people who can perform at that level and not be intimidated by it, and also to be able to be consistently good vocally. I think one of the most underestimated things about Eurovision is good song, you need a good song, good staging, you need a good staging. You have to have absolutely perfect vocals. Otherwise, if you fail to hit a note, if you're slightly off key, that's people can hear that all over Europe through their television sets, and they go, that person can't sing. And that's all they think about then for the rest of the song.
Interesting what you're saying there about like the potion of what we need. I mean, if you were to give any more advice to prospective Irish Eurovision entrants, and like sometimes we get people listening to podcasts and they'll message us who are hoping to submit songs and so on. We even get people sometimes asking us to listen to songs and things like that. What advice would you give people really seriously considering entering the process?
Well, I mean, I give, like songwriters, I always give the same advice. I said, don't write a Eurovision song, whatever you do, because people come along and say, I'm going to write a Eurovision song for you. I said, do not, like, write the best possible 3-minute song you can, right? And I said, it's not about writing, because, I think a lot of people, didn't like, and even though I just mentioned it there, the Wild Youth song, they felt the lyrics were too generic. They felt it wasn't really from an authentic place or whatever. That I think is a thing as well. I think people can spot that kind of inauthenticity, and they like, they just, if it's just kind of bland, aphorisms or, whatever, things about whatever, vague things, they always say if you're involved in any creative enterprise, I mean, like being vague is never good, and so, writing about specific things is always better, I think, than just coming up with a bunch of vagaries, they say it about poetry, they say it about everything. So I do say to songwriters just to write the best possible song, be authentic, write something. Don't like any song can be a Eurovision song. So don't think I'm going to sit down and like, I know what they love. They love up like high energy disco, blah, 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 or whatever it is, whatever the preconceived notions that they have. And a lot of people, very few people don't have some sort of Eurovision baggage, right? So people bring all sorts of preconceived notions to the competition, and it's very hard to, unless they go through it. I've had a lot of artists come to me afterwards and say, gosh, I wish I know back then what I know now about the whole thing, because now I know how I think I'd be able to crack it, because what we did wasn't right, when I kind of knew that, but, we'd already been through the process. And, when you've got a song, you've got to stick with it to the end, and so that's what I'd say to songwriters. To singers, just, you have to be on point. Like, you cannot not be on point. You've got to, like, if you're struggling with any section of the song, then the song isn't right for you and it's not right for you. You need to be able to deliver that consistently in your vocal range, like not just once, but a dozen times on that stage.
Absolutely. And I think as well, picking up on what you said about kind of, the generic songs, the Eurovision molded songs that people tend to write, particularly when we are now getting on Eurosong, the established acts in brackets, the likes of John Lydon, Wild Youth, their previous songs are there to judge as well. And I think a lot of fans would say about Wild Youth is, they could clearly see that was not really the band's style of music compared to, other material that they had released in the past. So, like you said, be authentic to yourselves and stick to your mold, really.
And I do think, thinking about songwriting camps and all that, and I was kind of against them initially, because I thought it's just a kind of a factory for writing generic, sort of inauthentic songs. And actually, I think I was probably doing it a misservice or whatever, because I do think other countries use them to very, very good effect. And I think maybe there's a good reason why they're using them and they consistently use them, is because they do get songs out of them that do well in Eurovision. And so I have definitely changed my mind about the notion of doing of songwriting camps being valuable. I mean, there was a guy called Ben Pine that ran one a couple of years ago. I think he still does it, actually.
Railta's song, I think, came from that this year,
Yeah,
Michael.
down in
The Use of
Wicklow.
the Valley,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I think that the first year he ran them, I think I listened to them all, and I didn't think there was anything there that was particularly useful for Eurosong at that stage. And I'm glad he persisted with it, because, as I said, you're right, Railta came from that this year, and that was co-written by Ryan as well, Ryan O'Shaughnessy. So I do definitely think there's a value to those, and I would like to see more of them. And I think we will look at, definitely. I don't know how involved we can be officially, RTE, in terms of resourcing or financing them or running them ourselves. I'm not sure how practical that's going to be, but I'll certainly be available to help anybody that wants to run one, or if they want somebody to come down and listen to songs, I'd certainly do that, no question.
You heard it here first. If anybody's thinking of doing the sort, you can contact Michael.
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, like, we're looking for the best possible song we can send to Eurovision. Like, that's the whole goal, and so anything that helps us get that song that wins Eurovision, I'm in favour of, 100%.
Absolutely. And looking at this week, you've mentioned the head of delegation meeting that took place on St. Patrick's Day in Basel. Your kind of first official trip over on the delegation. I'm always so intrigued by this collection of delegations coming together, broadcasters. You have little changes some years, major changes other years. For example, when the juries were taken out of the semi-finals and so on. Can you shed some light on that meeting for us?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's just a chance for the host broadcaster to really just talk about their preparations for Eurovision in May. So they will talk us through things like the logistics of the venue, the delegation bubble, and there was a lot of discussion around that since last year's show, because there were people had various issues with different aspects of that. So a lot of work has been done to try and improve the experience for artists backstage, and there's all sorts of things now where there are quiet zones, there are no filming zones, the whole dressing room area now is going to be a no filming zone. Whereas in the past, it was like Houston Station. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just people, hundreds of people, there was noise all the time. There were people blaring music. There were people doing vocal warm-ups. There were people doing interviews. There were people filming, all sorts of, so it was just a very hectic environment. And so now they've looked at the setup backstage, and I think that's going to definitely improve the experience this year. Normally we talk about things like, security situation or whatever. That wasn't discussed hugely this year. Things like, just public transport, just the normal kind of logistics that what delegations would expect when they come to Eurovision. And then there's another separate area where we meet the contest team individually, and we go through all of our staging plans, because we have to have everything basically nailed down by the 10th of March. So we don't have an awful lot of time between the Eurosong and the 10th of March to get everything we need together, because there are deadlines, that's the deadline, that's the cutoff point, beyond which, I don't know, they'll fine us or they'll do something if we don't deliver all the materials on time. So we have to have our staging plans done. We have to have our thoughts on what our graphics are going to be, and if we're going to have a prop, what that might be, and also if we're going to make the graphics ourselves, or if we're going to get the contest team to make the graphics. So they're kind of things that we have to consider before then. So we meet them I met them on the Tuesday afternoon, went through all of that with Marvin and his team from Black Skull, and then so that kind of thing. So then the rest of the time is really just catching up with my Eurovision colleagues as well. So we had we had, after the meeting was over, we went to a little restaurant, and I met the two volunteer hosts who are going to be with us in Basel. They're two American women who are living in Basel, and they're our volunteers. So they've been appointed to try and help us with anything that we need when we're there. And then it's just kind of, say, catching up with the rest of the Eurovision gang, So they're always, 80% of them are the same as last year. There's always a few new people that, that we want to get to know as well. And then we elected 3 members of the reference group, so that was an important part of the meeting as well, where anybody, like any head of delegation, can put themselves forward to be elected for the reference group. And so we elected 3 new people. We elected Molly Plank from Denmark, Claudia from the Netherlands, and Carla from Portugal, who was reappointed. She's been on the reference group for a few years. But Molly and Claudia are new, and so I was kind of delighted to see those 2, because Molly's been knocking around the competition as long as me, probably for 10 years or so. And so I was glad to see Molly on the group, and I think there's a good mix, because we have obviously somebody from the Scandinavian country, we have somebody from Netherlands, sort of Western Europe, very similar to ourselves, I suppose, and Portugal. So they'll probably end up co-opting maybe another 1 or 2 members, probably from Eastern Europe, maybe, just to kind of balance out the reference group a little bit. But so that's the other thing that happened, the other exciting thing that happened on Monday. And then did that on Tuesday, came home. Tuesday
You're
night.
chatting to us.
I'm talking to
Never
you.
stops.
Yeah.
It just, speaking of the reference group there, would you ever consider going for it yourself? Obviously, you're very busy, within RT,
I did 1 year, and I came 4th out of there was 3 people appointed, and I came 4th out of 9 people, I think, ran that year. So
that's like an 11th place in a semi-final.
It was like coming 11th place in the semi-final. So to be honest, that was like back when I was kind of younger and more, not that I was more enthusiastic, but I was kind of younger and more eager, I suppose, to get involved at that level of it. I'm kind of happier now that it does take a lot of time, because you do have to go to a lot more meetings, and you do have to travel a lot more to those meetings, so they're so yes, I kind of thought, look, I'll leave it to somebody else. I'm happy to give my input into the people who I know on the reference group, and and in fairness, I trust them to do a great job and to do whatever they need to do on it. I'm sure they'll get on fine without me. But no, I think it's probably for somebody else.
Fair enough.
Good to get an insight into these things. And we won't keep you too much longer, Michael, I suppose, but we're looking forward now, of course, to Basel 2025. And you've mentioned a lot about like EMMY and all of the like wonderful things she's doing and her busy schedule. How do you find it? I mean, you're no stranger to, working with an artist who doesn't live in Ireland, but like, how do you find it kind of co-working remotely, I suppose, given EMMY is traveling a lot of the time in Norway, etc.? How's that going?
I mean, it's a little more difficult. I mean, there's no doubt about it, because we're obviously in different time zones and all that, and so we don't have access to her, I suppose, as much as we would like, in terms of even things like wardrobe fittings or whatever, or doing that kind of thing. I'm kind of used to it now, because as you said, like we've had artists living in different countries. Like Leslie Roy was in New York, even though she moved back here for a lot of the time, which made it a lot easier. Bambi was based in London. I'm sure we've had others based in other countries as well over the years. But yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but at the same time, it's not unmanageable, it just increases the amount of emails and stuff that go back and forth, that when you just rather get them into a room and sit them down and say, right, go through all the stuff we need to go through, and that kind of thing. So even when it came to making the video and that kind of stuff, so like, we discussed, like, would we bring EMMY and Ireland back to Ireland to make the video, or would we try and get some Norwegian video company to make it? And, and if it needed dancers, are we better off just doing it in Norway? So in the end, we made it in Norway. So that involved logistics in terms of hiring a Norwegian video company and all that kind of stuff. And I'd say RT have protocols about hiring people, you know what I mean? So all of that I have to negotiate in terms of dealing with RT's financial, system. And it just can be slow and painful at times, but I understand why there is systems in place and all of that. It's not as if I'm some sort of anarchist that just thinks, that we can just be, flying to Norway with a suitcase full of cash, giving it to people. So I do know why there are good reasons, why different things are in place. But it can be frustrating for me trying to get, people paid, I suppose, promptly. But, as I say, I do understand why my colleagues put these systems in place.
Logistics.
Yeah.
It's great when we get to chat to you like this, Michael, and thank you so much, because even I think since our first chat back in 2022, the fact that you're so open to talk about your role, I think listeners and Eurovision fans can really understand how hectic your job is. And like, when you think that's a slice of your job as a producer in RT, it's massive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big slice of my job, I suppose. But yeah, and look, I don't think there's any reason why we in RTE would need to be secretive about this. Like, it's not a secret process. Like, it shouldn't be a secret process. You know what I mean? Or we're not trying to hide anything, or we're, so I was always very keen to say, look, this is how we do it. And one of the things that I did, it does feel like a long time ago now, was do these Eurovision work forums, whatever I called them back in the day, where I kind of got people in the August bank holiday weekend or whatever it was. Anybody who was interested, I got them into RTE. I don't know if either of you ever attended any of those, but and I got people over, like I got, so I brought William Adams over to talk about, Eurovision. Like, I brought Paul Jordan, from the UK over to talk to people about it. I brought some Austrians over to talk about, just after Conchita won, about how they did their thing. So I've always felt that the ultimate goal is to win this thing. So I don't pretend that I have all the answers as a television producer, or about how we go about doing that. So, and I am aware that there are a lot of people out there with a lot of very good ideas, and we should be open to listening to them and to implementing them where possible and where practical. So that's always the way I've approached it. And I'm also delighted to see that, like, the likes of you have started a very successful podcast, because Eurovision, I want to see Eurovision fandom, of which I'm a member, grow in Ireland. And I want to see people, appreciate the competition the way we do. And I want to see, that momentum behind it, like it is in some other countries. And I want to see us win it again, more importantly. So that's always been my philosophy. So I'm delighted to see you guys doing this podcast, and I'm always happy to come on and talk non-stop about myself and my life.
Oh, thank you for that. And I think you said it yourself there, you're a fan. And I think maybe a nice way to end the interview would be talk about 2025. And if you've had a chance to listen to any of the songs, if you have any favorites amongst the crowd of 2025.
I haven't. I've listened to the controversial ones because I had to, for various reasons. I haven't really. I mean, I heard the UK song. I quite like the bit of country, I have to say. I don't know if it's going to be how it's going to go down with the Eurovision audience. I don't know. But I haven't, outside of Maltese one and the Finnish one, because our old friend Sergio is working on with the Finns on their staging. So, and he was working with the Finns on UMK as well. So, and I met him actually. He was at the head of delegation meeting. He was there as part of the Finnish group, because they needed to do their talk with the creative team, obviously about their staging. So,
The
so
Austrians
I
with
haven't.
as
So
well.
that's a long-winded way of saying I haven't really listened to the rest of them. No, but I'm looking forward to. I did listen to the Albanian one actually for some reason because I thought going kind of climbing the odds a little bit, and so I was just curious about that. And I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting song. And I think it's got the potential definitely to grow on me, that Albanian one.
I hope you reminded Sergio where he started.
Sergio he absolutely knows where he started. So he will come back to work with us again in the future. Unfortunately, that was through my own fault that we failed really to secure his services this year, because he was jumped on by
So quickly.
like a lot of other delegations, and
Yeah.
they booked him a lot sooner than we did. And in fairness, I did ask him, and he did think about it, and he just said, look, he said he just, in all honesty, because he just couldn't take on another country, he thought, at this stage, because it would, he thought he just wouldn't be able to do a proper job for any of us. So I thought that, look, that was fair enough. And I said, look, we'll definitely talk to him next year about doing something, I'm sure. But listen, the good news is we're all still pals. We're very friendly, and it started on the Late Late Show for him. Well, not quite, but nearly.
You love that line, Michael.
Yeah. No, but in fairness, I mean, Bambi really brought him into our orbit, and so that's another reason to be thankful to them.
Would you ever consider bringing Sergio in for Eurosong? Similar to what UMK and have done.
Well,
obviously,
I think
it'd be very difficult, but
if we get to the point where we're in a bigger, arena or bigger stage, I think then definitely we would look at having to elevate everybody's performance by doing something like that. I just don't think it would. Just with the small stage we have in Studio 4, I'm not sure it would be necessarily worth it bringing someone like Sergio in. But look, who knows? Yeah, who knows? We may not be able to afford him in a year or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Could be done with Eurovision full stop.
But the good news is Marvin is on board, and I've known Marvin for a long time. Marvin has been, part of the competition for like 10 or more years, and he's a great guy. I've met him a lot over the years, and so when Sergio couldn't do it, I said, look, I know a guy who'll definitely do a really good job for us, and thankfully Marvin stepped up and has taken it on.
Exciting. And you mentioned there about when we were talking about the songs of this year, we've got to ask, because a few weeks ago when the whole Malta controversy was going around, the BBC were getting accused of, reporting it because of Ofcom rules and stuff like that. And some people even included Ireland in that list. Are you able to confirm or deny whether we had any involvement in the removal of Kant from Eurovision 2025?
No, I mean, in fairness, I think the BBC genuinely had an issue with it, and it was a legitimate issue because, like, remember that this is a family show. This goes out at 8:00 in the evening. The BBC are heavily regulated. We have a slightly different attitude to bad language in this country.
Ireland loves Kant.
But it's true, we do actually,
Yeah.
and people accept it as sort of part of idiomatic speech or whatever. If people say fuck, on a frequent basis or whatever, and so I think the rules are different in the UK, and the rules are really in America they can shut you down if you swear on television, like the licensing laws there are so heavily regulated. So I think people here would definitely have a different view. And also I think what the view we took, look, we've got a long history going back to Richie Kavanagh with Ein Focalela of the single entendre, being liberally used. That song was number 1 for 6 weeks. Let's not forget, and was played on daytime radio. And he had several follow-up songs, which I'm not even going to mention because they're, anyway. So, I think that's one thing. And then the second thing was the Maltese said it was the Maltese word for singing or whatever, right? So we took the view that, look, what we'll do is we'll just put it in context. I mean, we're not going to say, by the way, this sounds like, a 4-letter word beginning with C that your kids, you probably wouldn't want your kids hearing. Like, we're not going to say that. What we're going to say is that this is the Maltese word for singing. So that's what it was. Just put it into context, and then just let the audience make up their own mind about it. But as I said, because, I mean, look, let's be frank, it is a very clear reference to a well-known phrase.
Wordplay.
Yeah. So, so the BBC just took the view that serving cunt is not appropriate for a family audience on Thursday, whatever night they were on, Thursday night.
But RT didn't mind.
Semi-final. Well, I mean, like, we took the view that, I mean, to be honest, I mean, look, I don't think it's particularly clever. I think, you know what I mean? I think it's a bit, it's been provocative for the sake of being provocative. They know exactly what they were doing when they wrote that song. It's a good song. It's just it's like she sings it very well. It's very catchy, all of that. But it's definitely designed to be provocative on that level. And I think that when you consider that this thing is a family viewing, like, to be that blatant about it, like I say, it's not even a clever kind of, it's a fairly blunt attempt at being, provocative. So I just think that when you are conscious of a family audience, people watching it, all generations, grandparents, parents, kids, of all ages, that it, you do have to be careful. And that's why I think, a lot of people didn't like the UK Act last year. They felt it was just too much. And, whatever about the merits of the song and Ollie Alexander and all the rest of it, I think the reason why it got no points from the public was because a lot of people felt that it wasn't appropriate for the audience and the show. And, that's my view. Maybe other people have a different view, but I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't do well.
And I suppose it's the terminology of that phrase as well. It's still like a relatively new phrase in pop culture, in terms of, if you called somebody that word, it would be more offensive than saying somebody is serving cunt.
Yeah, but still in all, it's an offensive word. And,
yeah, exactly.
And in particular, that word, do you know what I mean? Like, that has a lot of very offensive connotations for a lot of people. And, like, whatever about if it had been a pun on the word fuck or whatever, it might have been a little different, but just that word has, I mean, you go to America, like, it's highly offensive to use that in, in parts of that great country. But at the same time, I've heard Billy Connolly, the Scottish comedian, like, who talk about this. And he said, obviously it depends on the context. You know what I mean? Like, like, you can say, whatever, like, did that guy do that thing? No, it wasn't him. It was some other cunt, whatever. And it's not as offensive as calling
the
somebody.
Accent kind of helps that as well, doesn't it? The Scottish accent.
Scottish accent helps it a little bit, but but you know what I mean. Context is everything. But I think just that was particularly provocative. That thing, and that using that word and that phrase, serving cunt, whatever. I personally didn't think it was that clever, you know what I mean? And I thought it wasn't necessarily appropriate, and maybe that's just me becoming more conservative in my old age, but I just think that maybe not the right forum for it. Now, having said that, I think what they've done is very clever. They haven't replaced it with another word. They've just dropped it. So what's going to happen is that everybody in the arena is going to be screaming that word when Malta come on stage. So we're going to hear it probably one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. There we have it. And obviously BBC have Ofcom to answer to as well for all of that. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and we have the public to answer to as well. I mean, and I like, we were discussing this inside, and I said, look, I've no doubt we're going to get complaints. You know what I mean? We're going to get complaints from people with kids watching the show, going, you know, we don't expect this. It's not, you know, and like a lot of the viewing, people get offended when they're, particularly in television, when they're confronted by stuff they're not expecting in that show. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, I remember a couple of years ago, I was involved in a New Year's Eve show in which there was a Waterford Whispers did a sketch that gravely offended members of the Catholic Church, including the Archbishop of Armagh. And you know what? I had to, like, at the end of the day, I said, look, yeah, you know, they're right, because we were doing a New Year's Eve show where people weren't expecting that kind of thing. If we were doing it on RTE2 and people said, oh, this is an edgy comedy show, nobody would have batted an eyelid. There wouldn't have been one complaint. But because we stuck it in the middle of a family New Year's Eve show, it got a huge amount of complaints. And it's all about the context of it. You know what I mean? And so I think, like, if the Maltese singer came on the Late Late Show on any given Friday and sang that song, there probably wouldn't have been that many complaints. But doing it at a time and in a place where people don't expect to be, you know, confronted
St. Patrick's Parade.
That would have been another example of the wrong
going up the Liffey.
Yeah.
God,
well, listen, what's Eurovision without controversy? Hey?
Yeah.
Like, there's always something.
And it gives Joe Duffy stuff to talk about in May. So
True.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something. I don't think there's ever been a Eurovision that I've done that hasn't been something, you know, that has driven people to Joe Duffy.
Well, we hope that this year will go, you know, without as much controversy as possible. And I think definitely for Ireland anyway, having somebody as wholesome and enthusiastic, like a ray of sunshine that EMMY is, and her brother and her team, I think we're really looking forward to Basel here at Éirevision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so am I. And thanks as always for your support. I know EMMY certainly appreciates it, and as we all do.
Absolutely. And Michael, thanks so much for your time today. And best of luck with everything in Basel.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Not at all.
And there we have it. That was our chat with Michael Kealy, the Irish head of delegation, and just all around same man. I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago on the podcast because we would be too terrified. Just the verb is the same man. But yeah, he's a lovely, lovely man, and a lot of time for Michael. And again, thank you so much to Michael giving up his Friday night.
Thank you, Michael.
Spend it with us, lovely people on the Éirevision podcast. But yeah, great chat, right? Very insightful, just very chill, kind of, you know, go with the flow.
It's funny, like, we mentioned Connor at the start when we started chatting to him there about, like, looking back at October 2022 when we first spoke to him. I mean, probably not a date significant for him. You know, he's had so much going on in his role, but definitely significant for us, like as a podcast, as a team, because it was the first time we spoke to him, one of our very first episodes. And like, definitely, like, that was a conversation that felt a long time coming, because for a lot of newer, younger fans in the community, and I think fans in general, to be honest, it was a really good forum. I remember we took like questions off our listeners as well at the time. It was a really good forum to like ask the really basic questions at the time of like, who is your team? Like, what is your funding? Like, how does the selection work? Like, would you change this? Would you change that? Why do you do things that way and not this way? And like, it was nearly like that was the starter pack, you know. It's like we got everything out of the way. And if you're a newer listener, like, it's definitely worth going back and listening. I think that's like maybe our third or fourth ever episode with Michael Kealy at the end of 2022. I think we released it in the December, something like that. But like, this is now our fourth time speaking to him in depth. I know you had a few chats with them in Malma as well. But like, the questions now that we can get into, given like Michael has been so open with not just ourselves, but various fan media outlets over the years, you know, and really given a good insight into what the delegation does. We were really able to get some interesting talking points, I think, in today, and kind of really understand further like the point at which Ireland is in 2025. it's kind of mad to think like this could be like a time capsule of this year, you
Yeah.
know, and we could look back and listen and see how things are and all of that. Any highlights for you that stand out? Probably hard to pick.
Hard to pick, but I think just the general insight into Eurosong, the process again, the head of delegation meeting, just kind of hearing how kind of just formulaic it is, kind of quite boring meeting. You know,
Yeah.
we always think, oh my God, the heads of delegation are meeting, but it's just a load of paperwork. What were you saying? There's about 40 forms that have to be signed. Like, that's crazy when you think about it. So I think just that inside, obviously the backstage gossip and, you know, his thoughts on the Samantha Mumba saga and, you know, everything
Yeah.
like that. Like, that's interesting. Was it RT that complained about Kant or not? Obviously it wasn't, but there was concern. So it's interesting just to hear his thoughts and stuff. And like echo what you said there about kind of, you know, going back and looking at the time capsule of our interviews with him. And it just shows you the time where we were as fans, and obviously Ireland as a country within Eurovision
Yeah.
was too. You know, our first interview, we were on the back of another non-qualification, not really knowing where to go. You know, we had the return of Eurosong, but you know, we didn't really feel it was a pathway forward. Whereas now, 2025, though it's still on the late, you know, as we said in the interview, Eurosong is literally completely different to what it was. We're attracting big artists. We're seeing staging elements. We're seeing a successful result. Obviously last year with Bambi. Hopefully again this year with Like a Party and EMMY. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. The way you were describing it there kind of reminds me of like, you know, studying for the leaving cert or the junior cert really, you know, first year. It's very basic. It's like, this is my job, this is my team. Whereas now we're third year, we're nearly at the exam. And it's like, okay, tell us like, why didn't you use A, B, Y light and like C, D, E light was available? And you know, we're getting into that kind of nitty gritty stuff. But like, that's what we want to know. Like fans are sick of, tell us about the team, tell us about the, you know, the time of discussion. How many songs did you get? Like, obviously that's interesting information, but like, we want to
know
get,
it.
where's Claire?
Yeah.
Where is she? Like this kind of information. Like that's what we want to know and really know what's going on right now in the team. And like Michael was saying, like, you know, preparing for pre-parties, you know, preparing for the staging, you know. So that's what like fans want to know. And I think we're all grown up a bit now that we kind of want to move away from the basic ass questions. And
Yeah. I think as well, like it's worth saying for anybody listening, like we know we've all types of listeners here at the Éirevision podcast. It can be fans, it can be prospective Eurosong entrants, it can be like current or past representatives. You know, we've all sorts of people listening. Bambi randomly messaged us about an episode recently, which was hilarious.
They gave out to us.
What did we say?
It was I think it was with the panel, and we said something about.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
we hooked them into thinking that like the whole panel was the issue, and they were like, "Oh, it wasn't me," and we were like, "Oh, sorry, don't worry, we'll correct ourselves."
No, Bambi's got the Bambi message that they were cackling at something. Anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway, we've all sorts of listeners, as we say, and like it's important to know how open Michael is as a person and as an employee within the organization. Terms of like, if you have questions about the process, if you're interested in the process, songwriting camps, I think that's super interesting. How
Really
when we
interesting.
first asked him about that like years ago, he wasn't as keen on that idea, and obviously, you know, he's spoken to peers and colleagues, and he's quite open to the idea. So it's definitely worth people, you know, reaching out. Obviously, we're not asking you to spam Michael Kealy's inbox, guys, but like if you have something helpful to contribute or to ask, you know, he's an open person in that sense. So it's good to get that feeling that like, you know, look, RTE is not a rich organization when it comes to funding for Eurovision, and they're working within their means in a lot of ways. But like, as a small nation, it's good to see that we are trying in a sense, and that like the selections being discussed at length, it's not like a chucked together thing. I think years ago it used to feel like that, and whether it was or not, like we don't know, but we just have a better understanding of the overall process, I think, thanks to his time and his words. As we say,
Yeah.
there we have it.
There we have it. Another episode with Michael Kealy done and dusted. And guys, as we said at the start of the episode, make sure you are, of course, keeping in the loop with all our content. Of course, we're getting into the thick of it now. We have national finals done. We have all 37 songs competing in Eurovision 2025. We will be finishing off our recaps of the songs before getting into our quick fires as well. And as Lou said at the start, make sure you get involved with the quickfire with the quickfires as always, because the more people who get involved, the better understanding we can get of trying to predict and trying to see how Eurovision 2025 may turn out. And didn't last year we predicted the winner with Switzerland? I believe
we did.
I believe we did. So hopefully we can do the same again this year. So make sure you get involved. Of course, as we said at the start of the episode, head over and check out all our socials. Just look up Éirevision and you will find us. And make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you don't miss any of our big episodes, particularly the quickfires, because like Lou said earlier, they pump out every single day for a month. So keep in the loop, lads. Don't miss out on any of our content. Yeah.
Very excited. And our Emmy stuff recently too has been good fun.
Yeah, on our YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere. Just head over to our link tree as well. Linktree/Éirevision podcast, and you can find all the links to everything as well. Keep an eye because we might have something else coming soon as well. So keep an eye for that. Little teaser for you. But from myself and Lou, all we gotta say is
Slán go fóill.